Everyone, and welcome to our January 7th special council meeting. To call the meeting to order, may I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Dunstall, seconded by Councillor Cressman. All those in favour? That carries unanimously. And I will turn it over to Councillor Cressman for a territorial acknowledgement.
We have gathered in Wilmot Township on the traditional territory of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Mississauga peoples. We also want to acknowledge the importance of the Dish with One Spoon Covenant, a peace agreement made between the Indigenous nations before the Europeans arrived. It characterizes our collective responsibility to each other and Mother Earth. We should only take what we need, leave enough for others, and keep the dish clean. By acknowledging this covenant and the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people, we are reminded of our important connection to this land where we live, learn, and work together as a community.
Thank you very much, Councillor. We do have additions to the agenda, and that's a few additional delegates as well as some correspondence. And I would ask that we look for a mover and a seconder to approve the agenda as presented. Moved by Councillor Dunstall, seconded by Councillor Cressman. All those in favour? That carries unanimously. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. So this evening we have 19 delegations who have registered to address the Committee of the Whole this evening. Each speaker will have 7 minutes to address Council, and I will call them up when it is their turn to speak. I'd like to remind all delegations of some guidelines for participation. For those who are joining us in person, please proceed to the podium when you are called upon to speak. I know a few of you are in the overflow room downstairs. Not to worry, I will give you time to be able to come up from downstairs. And if you conduct yourself in any of the following manners, it will result in immediate removal from the meeting, including interrupting councillors, staff, or other delegations, derogatory statements about councillors, staff, or others, turning your camera on at inappropriate times, or hate or defamatory comments. One last reminder for delegations, please do not take offence if you're following your presentation. There are no questions from Council. This is really Council's time to listen and reflect upon the opinions and ideas shared from our community members. And although it is rare, I would like to remind delegates and members of the public that failure to adhere to proper decorum may result in your microphone being muted or removal from the meeting. And out of respect for all meeting participants, I kindly ask that those in the gallery remain seated unless exiting the chambers, and to avoid personal conversations or expressions of support or opposition to those speaking in order to allow everyone to hear the proceedings as they occur. So tonight is our public input night for the budget. I do just want to remind everybody that this is a draft budget proposal at this point in time, and I'm really hoping that we do hear some solutions, as I know it's been quite resounding at this point in time that not many people are happy with the current proposal, and that's absolutely, I anticipate to hear that tonight, but I do hope that we also hear some possible suggestions going forward, and Council will then be having our special Council meeting next week, where we will take collectively the information from tonight as well as that we've all been collecting from our residents and bring that forward on the 16th. So with that, I will invite up our first speaker, and that is Barry Wolf. Barry, thank you for joining us this evening, and you will have 7 minutes.
Everybody's reminding me on the way up. 7 minutes, 7 minutes. You'd think I've never been here before. Good evening. Decision-making is grounded on access to complete, accurate data about all the factors that have an influence on any particular decision. In the case before us tonight of a potential budget in Wilmot Township, I'm still looking for information, and I trust councillors are also, before I could be able to offer any valid suggestions, solutions based on known fact, and any incremental steps that can be taken about allocations of money in any particular area. I'm still looking for data. There's no rational world, as I understand it, such a world to be, where a budget can be set without accurate, complete data. I'm asking for answers to these unknowns. Councillor Sadu on December 12th said, quote, "Ultimately, it can't just be a one-way road of what we just need to increase revenue, increase taxes. We need to look at potential service cuts. That being said, I would ask that the departments have a report back for next time we meet of services that they provide and the operating costs for each service." The response from the CAO was, bigger, more sophisticated, more advanced municipalities than us can't do that. So we will not be able to do that. And I want to be very cautionary to say, quote, that a service-based budget that breaks it down by every service is every municipality's dream. And I don't know of any that have actually achieved it. For the information of the Council and the CFO, I supply this information. It does appear to be happening as standard practice nearby. A Wilmot resident who is an employee of a neighbouring municipal government attended a recent town hall. He said he's one of 5 in a department with a budget of, I think he said $12 or $20 million, I can't remember, it was large. 5 guys, 20 million, 12 million. And his department submits regular operating and budget reports up the line. They're able to provide such specific detail that they can account for how much they spent on paper clips, going back as many years as you want. Every department does the same, and the numbers get collated in the CFO's office. I'm quite confident of the capabilities of our department's heads' ability to manage their departments to a similar standard. This corporation recently spent $300 grand on specialized accounting software. I think maybe an answer, we will do our best. I'm hoping they will be told to do their best and get that information to us. On December 12th, the CFO reported that the good practice and best practice is to recover the cost of staff against the capital projects that they work on. Quote, so whether it's an engineer, an overseer of a project, a technical person, the design specifications, those types of things should be recovered against capital projects. He says, secondly, if there are things like development charges or specific grants, they can be applied against staffing. If. 2 letters. That's the biggest little world. The Wilmot resident, who's employed in the nearby municipality, also indicated at that hall that all their staffing costs are budgeted in the operating budget. It's not accepted practice to artificially reduce the total operating cost of staffing by sliding it into capital. Staffing is not charged against any project in the capital budget. Staffing is separate. Lawyers get paid on a percentage of billable hours. Staff in municipalities, it would appear, successful nearby municipalities do not. They get paid out of the operating budget. So to do this transfer, it would reasonably to conclude that moving an operating cost of staff from the operating budget is to artificially reduce the operating budget and thus requiring an increase in the capital budget. Using this new accounting system would absolutely prove that we do have a capital budget revenue problem. Staffing represents between $7 and $9 billion, depending whether you're looking at the 24-25 ledger, of the total budget. So you're taking Richard's expenses and asking Paul to pay for it out of operating and into capital. That's the pea in the shell. Yes, it is reducing the operating budget, but it's putting it as a part of the base capital budget, and that's not the way it should be done. So yes, you've got bare bones operating budget because you've taken $7-9 million and shifted it to capital. The CFO has reported that Wilmot has about $13 million in debt. He's reported that debt is primarily financed by developmental charges. On September 13th, Council voted to waive the development charges for a non-profit private corporation in the amount of $1.5 million. The CFO indicated that that loss of revenue, to normally be used to finance debt, is now lost, but would be addressed during budget deliberations. And that is now on Council to address that loss of revenue. Where are you going to make up the 1.5? I don't see it anywhere. It's a debt that could have been paid. So how are you going to make up the loss? You voted to give them out. You got 2 choices, renege or find a way to put it in the budget. The CFO has used Guelph a few times as a reference for practice in this experience. I checked out the Guelph's budget. They use a 4-year rolling budget that accommodates transition of items over time to moderate the effect on taxpayers. Guelph has a 10-year capital forecast. Stratford has a 10-year capital forecast. You name a municipality, they got a 10-year capital forecast. Where's our capital forecast for 10-year budget? The capital budget, 10-year forecast. It doesn't exist. If I was a councillor, I could not make a decision if not knowing what's coming down the line in 10 years. On December 12th, the CAO addressed the cost of labor and indicated the 2.5 COLA would be costed in It's up to council to decide if that's appropriate.
1 minute remaining.
Whatever. Thanks. I guess there's other things that we don't have that we should know. There's an audited financial statement issued.
I am a father of 3 young, growing children. Food prices are projected to increase this year by 3 to 5%. I live in a 2-tier municipality where the upper tier just increased its share by 9.48%. I live in a country where a carbon tax is going to further increase the cost to fill up my family minivan and operate my home appliances. I live in a world where taxpayers are being nickeled and dimed so that government can continue to spend at an unsustainable rate. Next slide, please. I stand before you today to address the pressing issue of our municipality's budget. Firstly, it is imperative to acknowledge that the decisions of budgets past have come back to haunt its future. Decades of historical shortfalls have left us with a need for corrective action. However, it is important that we approach this situation with a fair and balanced plan, considering both the added burden to the taxpayer and the need to ensure the long-term sustainability of our finances. Many Wilmot residents are already struggling. There are neighbors in our community that are choosing between paying their bills or feeding themselves. Residents with lower wages and fixed incomes are finding it increasingly difficult to pay their rent or remain in their home due to rising costs. It is your duty to ensure that any financial decisions made do not intensify these hardships. Next slide, please. Thank you. For example, the proposed $1.5 million in DC relief to expand 160 beds at Nithview, while commendable and generally supported, by myself included, will also be shouldered in part on the backs of thousands of Wilmot retirees and seniors, those who choose to continue living in their home because it is not only more cost-effective, but a place where they can also guarantee to stay in their home together. We need a multi-year strategy to raise taxes in a manner that enables our residents to plan their budgets accordingly. That said, the reliance of continual tax increases to satisfy our spending requirements is unsustainable and will only lead to further discontent among the community. It may require that we put our ideologies aside to make decisions that may feel uncomfortable, decisions that are necessary to provide fairness and balance to the taxpayer. Next slide, please. Simply put, 51% is not acceptable. Regardless of bar graphs or impact comparisons, it is important to realize the severe and unprecedented impact to taxpayers that this single increase poses, which is almost guaranteed to happen again in next year's budget cycle. Therefore, I propose a compromise that provides a modest operational increase with a larger emphasis on our capital requirements. If addressing our capital funding deficit is dire, then we must be forced to operate leaner. Next slide, please. I also realize that a new funding model between the province and municipalities is needed, especially with Wilmot experiencing funding decreases from the Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund. Therefore, I have included for consideration a council resolution to the Ford government. This resolution calls for a new funding framework that ensures sustainable and predictable financial support, especially for rural communities like Wilmot that are experiencing its next phase of growth, with an emphasis in increasing funding for capital projects. I ask that Council pass this motion at the same time as the budget. Next slide, please. Thank you. In conclusion, I oppose this budget, but willing to compromise if it is part of a broader strategy that addresses our financial challenges in a sustainable manner. Yes, we need a new deal with the province, but more importantly, Wilmot taxpayers need a new deal with their municipality. I trust Council will pass a budget that is fair, responsible, and considerate to the needs of all of our residents. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you very much, Rory, for joining us this evening. We will now call on our next delegation, Neil and Carol Morris, and I believe, you've already come upstairs. Perfect. Thank you very much for joining us, and you'll have 7 minutes.
Thank you. Starting time. Thanks. I don't envy your job at this point. I know your municipality. I'm a recent resident of this municipality. I just came in a couple of years ago. And I know this is a brand new council for the most part. Most of your senior staff has also flipped over in the last couple of years. And a lot of the stuff that's going on right now goes back 10 plus years. We've had a municipality that's expanded greatly in that time, and we haven't been able to keep up with it. It seems like that's what's happening. And we've had a lot of things that have been historically done in the municipality that maybe need to be reevaluated and looked at a little more thoroughly. It's a shock. It's a pretty big increase. Like I said, I don't envy your jobs at this point. I have budgets and stuff like that I deal with too on a professional level, and can see the concerns that you're dealing with. I do have a couple suggestions and thoughts that maybe you guys could at least look into it. Some of the things would be like the recreational complex that we have. It was built a number of years ago. Have we paid that off entirely at this point? That's a question to council I have. We should probably try to get some of these more revenue neutral, so it's not coming out of the general tax dollars. Maybe for this year, maybe in a couple of years we can reevaluate it when we don't have quite as much of a crunch. There is also development charges and I know like the water services and stuff like that. I don't know if Wilmot does the same thing that Kitchener does. So when they do a full road reconstruction, the only thing that comes out of public funds for that one is the sidewalks. Everything else is either from water services, stormwater management fees, and the water fees as well as the gas tax. So that's completely full road reconstructions, except for the sidewalks, are revenue neutral. That would probably reduce a lot of the burden on the property tax base. It would shift it over to other bases, but for a lot of those services, those are the people that use it. If you can't use it, maybe we should go a little more user pay system instead of going the historic routes that we were previously. I've also noticed that you have a lot of money that you're putting in capital reserves. I'm wondering where that is coming from at this point. I didn't see in the budget like where those what those actual funds are being allocated for. There's quite a substantial $2 to $3 million going into those capital reserves. Is that something that's trying to pay off deficit at this point, or is it bridges and things like that that maybe we can pull it back for a couple of years to be able to make the tax increase this year not as substantial? The other thing I've noticed is our at least in the municipality, the civil service here has greatly increased over the last 10 years. You've gone from a relatively smaller public sector to a fairly large one. We've definitely increased our population as well, and again, maybe we should try to go back some more user fees in those cases for like licensing, burn permits and things like that, make it more revenue neutral at this point. And even for the fire department, I know they do a great job. Most of them are volunteer at this point. Maybe we can, again, dial it back just a little bit, maybe not as much expansion this year, and put it on the next couple of years, just to spread it out a little bit more, to make it a little bit easier. I think what we have to try to do in this budget is try to be a lot more leaner, because it is a pretty big hit at this point. I know the region portion is a lot, they're about 55%, so even a 9% is actually a pretty big increase on their part, but the 50% is a pretty big hit at this point too. And I know our mill rate is a little bit lower compared to the surrounding municipalities too, but those are my thoughts and comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Neil, for joining us this evening and for sharing your thoughts. We will now call upon Ted Shapiro. Ted, thank you very much for joining us this evening, and you will have 7 minutes.
I am a resident of the Foxborough Green condominiums for seniors. There's a number of us here troublemakers tonight. Foxborough is a community of mostly retired seniors on fixed incomes with no opportunity for residents to go out and earn more money to meet a major, ridiculous tax increase of over 50% from Wilmot Township. We're already facing significant tax increases from the region of Waterloo, and we also have provincial and federal income taxes to pay and gas taxes and so forth. There are approximately 220 homes in Foxborough, mostly couples, which equals approximately 400 voters. There are also 2 other similar communities in Wilmot, Morningside and Stonecroft, with even more homes and more fixed income retired voters. All 3 retirement condo communities probably would add up to maybe roughly 1,000 voters. How many of you councillors currently serving or mayor won your last election by more than 1,000 votes? This issue has raised a lot of concern at the town hall meetings, standing room only, full house here tonight. I'm repeating a few things that previous people have said. We acknowledge that all this rancor is not just the fault of the current Wilmot Council. You've inherited it. It results from the lack of guts from councils of many years past, the Dickens of councils past. It's now caught up with us. However, we don't think that today's taxpayers should be burdened with making up for those poor decisions made by previous councils in one horrendous whack like this proposed increase in just 1 year. It's insane. As a few other people before me have recommended, my suggestion to council would be make a plan with a compromise of maybe a 10% increase for each of the next 5 years. Or somebody mentioned a 10-year plan, so maybe 5%. Any municipal government proposing a double-digit tax increase under current financial conditions. Previous gentleman mentioned inflation, fuel, food, housing, etc., in the news every day, should have its head read. You may think that we elderly residents are just old people with poor memories. I can promise you that should we see a Wilmot property tax anywhere near what has been suggested by Mr. Clark, we will absolutely remember it for the next election. We voted out a previous council over a ridiculous issue of trying to change our history of prime minister statues in a nice little park, which we're now paying to store. We will not forget any tax increase that gets passed that exceeds 10%. Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us this evening, Ted, and for sharing your thoughts. I will now call up David Bricker. Thank you very much, David, for joining us this evening. And you will have 7 minutes.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor and Council of Wilmot Township. Dave Bricker. I live at 1768 Whitmer Road since 1975. So I've been paying my taxes as a good boy should for all those years, keeping things going. And I've been responsible with my property to keep it updated and in shape and that I can afford. Okay, I'm on a fixed budget. I'm 84 years old, so people tell me I don't look it, but sometimes I feel worse. Anyway, many households in Wilmot are already struggling to make ends meet due to the inflated cost of living. Take, for example, groceries, way out of whack. Fuel for your car, for your truck, and to heat your home is all, in my opinion, a lot more than it should be, of course. Now unfair tax increases. My taxes now are a good amount and per year, and if you multiply this by all the properties in Wilmot Township, it adds up to a good chunk of money. And I'm just wondering, where does that money go? I said I'd keep it short, and I'm going to do that. I wonder how the people of Wilmot will vote next time. Thank you for your time. Respectfully submitted by myself, David Bricker, and my family. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, David, for coming in, for sharing your thoughts. We will now move along to our next delegate, Darlene. Darlene, thank you very much for joining us, and you will have 7 minutes.
I wanted to hear you try and say it.
To be honest, it didn't show up when I flipped the page.
That's fine. My name is Darlene Van Tenakboom, and I live on Foundry Street in Baden. We purchased our house in 2016, and at that time the property taxes were $3,204. We are the second owners of our house and the first owners with the house separated from farmland. The next year, 2017, we received the tax bill. The township had put our property back to farmland category, and the tax bill was $1,088. I contacted the township office and was questioned, how did I get the tax bill, as it did not belong to me. I was told I needed to bring that tax bill into the township office ASAP. I did, and soon after we were mailed the revised tax bill for $4,107. We were shocked by the increased amount, but did not question it, as we assumed the township's tax department knew what they were doing. 2.5 months later, we received a supplemental tax bill for an additional $687, making the tax bill for 2017 a total of $4,794. That was an increase of $1,590 from the previous year. This time I did contact the tax department and asked, what was this additional bill for? I was told that it was an adjustment and due by the end of October. I asked how this number was arrived at, and at first I was told that this is the amount we owe and we just need to pay it. I continued to ask, and finally I was told by a township employee in the tax department that it was based on the assessed value on the MPAC statement and we had missed the deadline to file a dispute. I called MPAC and they told me they had not yet published a property assessment for our 1/3 acre property. When I told the lady at MPAC that the township had increased our taxes based on the non-existent MPAC assessment, she told me we could submit a request for reconsideration. We submitted the request, and many months later, the township adjusted our taxes back to $3,289 for 2017. For 2018, 19, 20, and 21, our tax bill remained in the $3,200 range. On May 4th, 2018, we received significant damage from the windstorm that hit most of Ontario. We ended up needing to renovate part of our kitchen due to water damage from the storm and required a construction permit from the township. The work was completed in 2020. Our taxes had a slight increase for 2022, up to $3,398, and at the end of that year, an MPAC representative showed up on our porch to discuss the renovations we had completed in 2020. He would not enter the house, only stand on the porch and ask questions regarding the renovations. He told me that during COVID, MPAC was behind on their assessments and properties province-wide are behind in receiving updated assessed values from MPAC. Due to the renovations we had done to our kitchen, which included removing 7 feet of wall, and during our time in the house, we'd replaced windows, exterior doors, furnace, and a new roof due to the storm, our property assessed value increased significantly. I have just recently found out MPAC has a unique way of doing their assessments. They do not put the assessment at the current date, but rather speculate what the assessed value would have been as of January 16th if our house was in the condition back then that it is now. That's right, they are still operating on assessed values that are now 9 years old. Due to COVID, they did not complete their regular periodic updates. With our increased assessment due to renovations, our tax bill of $3,398 in 22 jumped to $4,915 in 23, and another increase in 24. We are now at $5,298. That is an increase of $2,094 in the 8 years that we have owned our house. If I understand the proposed increase to the mill rate just for the township's portion, our taxes for 2025 would be at $6,066. That is not okay. We did not add any additions or finish any additional living space to our existing house. We maintained it and, due to a storm, updated the kitchen. 8 years ago, the township staff could not tell me or would not tell me how they calculated taxes, and now I'm hearing they have spent our township into the ground and want to increase our taxes to bail them out. What is going to happen when MPAC finally does their assessment updates? I was on the phone for an hour with them today. They still don't know when they'll do them. It will not be for the 2025 year, but perhaps by the in the later part of 25, we will get the assessed value for what it would be for 26. My question is, what's going to happen then? Our improvements, which were basically just maintaining the house, that was built in 1958, saw increases with the new assessed value from our 22 taxes to our 23 taxes of an increase of $1,517. These updated assessments will contribute to a greater tax revenue. Making a small, reasonable adjustment to the mill rate now is acceptable, but initiating a huge increase to fix the poor management of funds is unacceptable. We, as the residents of Wilmot Township, should not be expected to bear the huge burden of previous administration and council's decisions. Time to face reality. There is no money, and the proposed improvements and upgrades need to be prioritized, with only the absolute necessities being tackled first. I do not see the new replacement fire halls and hiring more staff as the solution, but perhaps evaluate who is not doing their job responsibly and for the best interest of the residents of the community they serve. Maybe a replacement of staff is a better part of the solution rather than spending more of the non-existent money and bringing in yet more staff. We are a township with property and assets. Look into financing some of these proposed expenditures rather than digging deeper into the pockets of the residents. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Darlene, and thank you for sharing your personal experience as well. Councillor Cressman has a question.
Are you aware that when reassessment occurs, it's revenue neutral to the township? Some go up, some go down. There is no more taxes generated. It's based on the assessment at the time of reassessment. So bear that in mind in terms of whether it's going to cause you sleepless nights, okay?
In the meantime, people that are applying for permits, it triggers MPAC to come out. So my values have gone up. Other people's have not. My taxes have increased significantly in the 8 years that we've been here with the proposals. We will pretty much have doubled. We have not built anything extra. I understand how it works. I am not going to buy it that it will go down. I'm not going to fall for that. I know that it's going to go up and our assessed values are going to be through the roof.
Thank you very much, Darlene. I will now invite up our next delegate, and that is Lori LaRich. Thank you very much, Lori, and you will have 7 minutes.
Yeah, there's more of a crowd this year than there was last year, I can see. Okay, I think I'm ready. I am. Mayor Salonen, council, and staff. My name is Lori LaRich. I've been a resident of Wilmot Township for 17 years now. I'm speaking tonight not in favor of the 51% property tax increase, as others have said. A one-time boost to capital infrastructure investment does not seem realistic. Long-term plan would be better, as it's been mentioned by other people. One of my concerns is if you get this cash injection, could the funds be spent somewhere else? And is it possible to ensure the funds collected for capital investment are only used for that purpose? I have been told it is not. If not, who would be responsible and how can they be held accountable? So again, I'm not in favor of a large cash injection. Government purchases are always third-party purchases. It's not their money they're spending. Most likely, they're not the end user, and price and quality are not considered in the same way if you were spending your own money. These are some suggestions I have for council, and it may seem like I'm picking on staff with my list, but employees are a big expense for any corporation. Hiring freeze, I would recommend a hiring freeze. Attrition to be used when people leave and people not be replaced. Possibly early retirement, and I suggest no wage increases for a predetermined amount of time. I also suggest in some areas that the township operates at a loss, such as the rec center and Castle Cove Bride, and this may be something that's done, I'm not sure, to have a maximum amount of funds, say a percentage of the budget that goes towards community events that operate at a loss. I understand there's things that happen at a loss, such as areas at the rec center, so that could be a possibility. I don't know if that's already being done. People say to get a job at the township, municipal, provincial, and federal government, and you'll be set for life. That mentality is not good. And I think that tells you there's something wrong. I've taken a look at the percentage of increases for Wilmot Township. Of course, it's 51% proposed, which is an estimated $580. The school board has approved a 9.48% increase, which they say is $241. and the region has approved 9.48 as well, which they say is $241, which would be a tax increase of $1,062 for residents of Wilmot Township. Canadians pay too much tax, as other people have said today. We pay federal tax, federal income tax, capital gains tax, corporate tax, carbon tax, HST tax, GST tax, fuel tax, and property tax, and we literally pay tax until death. I think that we pay too much tax, and this type of increase I do not support. I'm done.
Thank you very much, Lori, for joining us this evening. Councillor Wilkinson actually has a question.
Okay.
Through the chair, I'm just curious, the school board increase you've cited, where did you find that information?
I just Googled it online.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll look into that. Thank you.
Thank you again for joining us. I will now call on Krista Strauss as our next delegation. Thank you very much, Krista, for joining us, and you'll have 7 minutes.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Krista Strauss, and I grew up in St. Agatha, but mostly New Hamburg. Went away to university and, lived in the big cities when I was in my 20s. And then I missed living here, and my husband and I moved back here to raise our kids, because it's a great place to grow up, it's a great place to raise kids, and we hope to retire here too, because it seems like it's a great place to retire. First of all, I want to talk about the new proposed fire station. I think it's being funded by development charges, if I'm not mistaken, but I think we're in debt with that, if I'm not mistaken as well. So I think we should probably put a pause on that until we can balance that out better in the future. And if that happens, I understand we won't be able to have a spot for this bigger fire truck. So I guess we'll have to find another, I think we should just stick with a comparable fire truck to that for now. And then I understand there's some more fire trucks potentially down the road, so maybe that could be swapped over, and then at that time we would be in better financial position to, and maybe have a fire hall, and then we can buy the bigger fire truck at that time. So I really think we should think of better funding mechanisms for that. I know Wellesley has bought used fire trucks. They say though that there's maintenance issues with that, but if you can, they also said if you can find a really good fire truck, it could work. And then also, if we push this fire station, maybe by then we'll have a little bit more growth. That would also help with funding. And I have friends and family throughout the township, so I understand how important all these community centers are. Especially at St. Agatha Community Center. So I support putting the roof on, because I hear it leaks right now, and also redoing the flooring. My kids have gone to events there, I've been to stuff for there, and also they lost their school there, so they really don't have anything. And if we think of the future, it'd be hard to build something back there if we lose that. So I don't think, I think we should go ahead with that. Same with the New Dundee Library roof. I know Waterloo Economic Development, we pay $50,000 a year for the past 10 years, and that's $500,000. And I just think what we could have done with that money, but, and I understand they haven't really done much to help us here, besides advocating for this land grab. I'm not sure if we're able to put, I know they're thinking of putting an economic development position here for economic development and tourism. And I think that would be really great to get somebody that understands rural development better and can work with all the industries in our township, not just, they could work with, construction, manufacturing, commercial, health, agriculture is very important here, and hospitality, and so on. And they can work with the New Hamburg Board of Trade, the New Dundee Board of Trade, and so on. I think we have some very smart people here that do really great business. They've started, from their houses, and I just think of herb transport and so on. So we'd love to see more local business focus. And then I'm also concerned because those people, a lot of our businesses are local people, so they're getting hit twice. Once with their house, and then second time with their business. So I think we really have to be mindful of that. how that's going to affect businesses as well. And it'd be nice to have all the positions proposed, but I don't think we can afford that right now. So maybe with this new economic development tourism position, I don't know if it's possible to hire them halfway through the year, and so that's only a smaller percentage, and then the rest could be tackled on next year and then makes up for that difference. And I know Bill 23 is a big issue, and so I think we have to have that policy planner because it's going to be a lot of issues. I'm not sure, I know the province has been scaling back funding, and I would love to know whether Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund is, or even the CIF fund is right now. And if there's any way we can advocate to get more funding from the province, I think the public should do that. We should do that. We should advocate to the province that we need more funding for the municipality. And I know, and I think this year we're going to have to take some big hit. I understand that, but 50% like everyone else is a little too high. And so we have to really focus our needs and wants. And I know there's a lot of, I think we should really focus on getting our reserves up as well as doing what the infrastructure we need. Focus on that as well. And I have to give kudos to you guys. You guys turned down the third ice rink. I was really mad when that happened, but I didn't understand on how financial dire we were. So, so I'm glad that you did that at the time. At the time I did not understand that, but now I do. And I think maybe the best thing in the future would to put ice rink back into New Hamburg, the old arena, but that's something maybe once we can figure out better funding. And to be truthful, I always thought we had lower tax rates than everyone else because we had volunteer firefighters, because we have such a strong volunteer base. We saved the volunteers saved the township a lot of money. I think of Waterloo, the Horticulturist Society. I know it's changed its name now, but they do all their gardens around here. New Hamburg Board of Trade does a lot of work that saves the taxpayers money. And I think there's been a lot of heavy lifting from the community as well. And I also think of when I was a kid, I know there was issues with this place here. We went into debt and somehow we managed to get out of it. And I know a lot of the community came together and worked on that as well. So we can get through these problems as a township together. So anyway, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Krista, for joining us this evening and sharing your ideas. I will now call up our next delegate, and that is Steve Manns. Steve, thank you very much for joining us this evening, and you will have 7 minutes.
Good evening, Mayor and members of Council. First, I want to thank you for your time, energy, and dedication you bring to your roles. Serving on Council isn't easy, and your commitment to our community is truly appreciated. I'm here as a concerned resident of Wilmot Township to comment on the proposed budget and the governance issues it raises. As council members, you've been elected to serve our community and make decisions in the best interest of all residents, to manage resources responsibly and provide oversight and direction. You're accountable to the residents, and it's your job to represent us as you shape the future of our township. We've been told that our financial challenges stem from 20 years of poor decisions by past councils. While I'm grateful that the current council is asking questions, I'm concerned that some members are still deferring to city staff rather than stepping up to the oversight and governance responsibilities that come with the role. The current culture needs to change in order to correct the course. Taxpayers should not be viewed as an endless source of funds. That's not sustainable or sound financial practice. Where in this budget is the balance between raising taxes and cutting spending? Where are the reductions to non-essential programs? Or a review of staffing to determine what positions could be streamlined? Are there spending alternatives that could help bring down the $9 million this budget earmarked for fire services? Or is it prudent to spend $1 million on planning a new hockey arena when the existing rec center is running at less than 50% usage? Or to add additional full-time staff when short-term contracting may be more efficient? The acting CAO has presented one budget without alternatives, and it's your responsibility to ask the CAO and city staff to present alternative cost-saving measures that could ease the burden on taxpayers. I watched the December 9th staff presentation on the budget, hoping it would provide clarity to the proposed tax increase and the reasoning behind it. Instead, I came away deeply concerned. The responses from the acting CAO and city service directors to council's questions were vague and failed to offer the critical details needed for thoughtful decision-making by council. Claiming the budget contains no room for cuts, while also suggesting that a detailed breakdown of city services is impossible, points to serious flaws in the financial methodology. It also raises questions about whether council is being taken seriously. I understand that the challenges facing council are difficult. That's why I'm asking you to bring an independent municipal finance expert to conduct a thorough audit of the township staffing, capital, finances, and revenue sources. This step is essential to provide the clarity and insight we need before committing to the significant spending laid out in this budget. I once again thank you for your dedication to Wilmot Township, and I urge you to fully embrace your role as the governance body and ensure your township's resources are managed responsibly and in the best interest of everyone in our community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve, for joining us this evening. I will now invite up our next delegate, and that is Richard Jacks. Richard, thank you very much for joining us this evening, and you will have 7 minutes.
All right. Thank you very much. My name is Rick Jakes. I live in New Hamburg and have for 10 years. I want to start by acknowledging the 3 councillors who had the town halls. I was able to attend all 3. Very informative. I know they're not easy to do, but you have a respect for reaching out and engaging us in those, so thank you for that. I'm also going to say that I am going to start by not debating whether we need to do a capital expenditure or capital reserve builds. I think that's pretty clear that we do. But what got my attention was a 51% increase. And in the world I come from, 51% increase is a financial crisis. And when you hear of financial crisis, there's a few ways a financial crisis happens. It happens through fraud, which is not the case here. It happens through financial mismanagement, or it happens through incompetence, or a combination of those. And what I learned when I went to the town hall sessions was that we have had a history of financial mismanagement, it would appear. The other thing that I learned, which was surprising and maybe a bit alarming to me, is that our new council did not have the benefit of any financial training when they arrived on municipal finances, and yet you're now being asked to manage through a crisis. And that to me seems odd. The other thing I learned in those sessions was that we've had a turnover of CAO positions, I think 4 in as many years, which should set off alarm bells for all of us. I also learned that we've had an increase in the past 5 years of about 40% in our staff headcount, and that does not include the additional 5 that we're looking for in this budget. But I want to go back to the 51% part, because what I learned is it's comprised of 2 parts. It's the capital portion, so 37% of the increase goes towards capital, and that's a number in dollar terms that goes on in perpetuity once it's put in place. But what was really surprising and came out in the sessions is that we don't actually know the number that we need to have for capital reserves. We don't actually have a formalized capital budget, 10-year budget, to know what we need for reserves going forward. And so we're really just throwing a dart at the dartboard to say, this is what we think we need. And it's a 37% ask. And as a lay person, what I hear is, give me a blank check, we'll figure it out, and trust us to look after it. Well, based upon the financial mismanagement that has happened in the past, I don't have a lot of trust. And I don't think you should be asking for our trust to turn it over to you guys to make that decision until you've actually had the information to base it on. Because I'll draw your attention back to 2023, where we put in place a 2.8% increase with an escalation of 3.1%, which was supposed to be a special levy that was supposed to correct our reserve issue. But here we are again, and it seems every time we have a change in CAO, we have a new goalpost. I want to move over to the other part of the 51%, which is the operating budget part. And so we're looking for a 14% increase in our operating budget, which includes 5 new positions that range from $113,000 a year to $150,000 a year. I've never seen in a financial crisis where we have a double-digit increase in spending and we continue to hire. It actually works the other way. There should be a hiring freeze, and there actually should be a request across the board cut in expenses of, say, 10%. Those funds get redirected to the area of crisis. This seems so odd to me that we're looking for an increase at the same time we're saying we're in crisis. I think it's time that we actually take the punch bowl away. I don't envy the spot that you're in. This is a tough spot to be. You're being asked to manage through a financial crisis without training. We haven't given you the training to do that. You're being asked to do it with a CEO who's running hard to catch up, who hasn't been able to provide us with a 10-year capital plan. We don't have the financial statements on the website, so I don't know if they're available or not available. And you're being asked to deal with this at a time when we're in a recession, technically in a recession for the taxpayer. This is not an easy time, and it's going to be a very difficult decision that you're going to have to make. Although I would say, the final comment for me, is that if after all the deliberations and hearing everybody tonight, you still come back to us and say we need a double-digit increase in taxes, I'm going to say to you, it's probably time to pull the ripcord. Pick up the phone, call the province, and ask them to put in place a special financial monitor, because you've lost control and you have no idea how to fix the problem. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard. I just remind everyone, thank you in the gallery. Thank you very much, Richard, for joining us. Councillor Pressman did actually have a question.
Yes, I'm wondering how we correct numerous errors in your comments. We've only had 2 CAOs. And the experience, one was here 15 years, one was hired to replace for 5 years, and now we have an interim CAO. So that's point number 1. Point number 2, some of us have been chairs of boards where $50 million in spending and $75 million in spending was part of the budgets we had oversight on, but we are one member of a council who have to have votes by the entire council. So that's point number 2. And point number 3 is we've had a treasurer for 15 years and a contract treasurer last year, and the current treasurer CAO has been in the position for 8 months, I think, based on the information. And the budget he presented indicated once some major decisions were made on capital assets, then the 10-year capital, he could sit down and craft a 10-year capital budget.
Councillor, just if there's a question there, we're not getting into debate with our delegates.
I'm prepared to talk with you after.
Okay. We will now move along to our next delegate, and this is Stephen Palmader. Stephen might be downstairs, so I will give them a moment. Okay, it does not seem that Stephen is here at the moment, so I will move along on to our next delegate, Don Slowinski. Is Don here? Don is downstairs, I'm being told, so we will just give them a moment to make their way upstairs. Hello. I just want to confirm, Stephen or Dawn? Because I've heard apparently both were coming up from downstairs. So.
Stephen.
Stephen.
Volunteer.
Very good. Thank you for joining us, Stephen. You will have 7 minutes.
Bear with me one moment. All right. For generations, the family farm embodied the Canadian dream and was the quintessential Canadian small business. Farms would thrive from one generation to the next, as they have in my wife's family. Children would work the very same land as their grandparents, like my brother-in-law. Farmers were not just the engine of their family, but the engines of prosperity for their entire community, and that's what we're talking about here tonight. Farms were the best example of economic independence. The local family farm was integral to the success of the local community. The independent community bank would offer loans to buy new equipment, corner store employing kids from the local high school like myself, pharmacist to open up the shop after hours for the family of sick children, community physician, much like my own, with full knowledge of a family's medical history because she treated the entire family, the newspaper reporting on the local high school's PTA meeting and so forth. I went to Waterloo Oxford, the local high school. Success of the family farm was not just economic, but it was cultural as well. Local farming businesses sponsored Little League teams, took ads in the newspaper, donated to the local church, and much more. With these economic successes in mind, let's take a look at Loyalist Township near Kingston for an example of how to bungle this engine of prosperity. After breaking ground in 2023, the company that was building the plant to produce battery components for electric vehicles in Loyalist Township now says it's delaying construction of the plant, citing a slowdown in EV sales. The project carried a total price tag of up to $2.76 billion with a B and was projected to create 600 jobs in the region near Kingston back in 2023. The province was to pay up to $424.6 million, but as of last Friday, no provincial money has flowed to Umicore or Loyalist Township. Umicore says it's realigning its operations to a new market reality, while Loyalist Township is left holding the bag. This community asks you, Council, to begin realigning with reality as well. Unlike Wilmot, the mayor of Loyalist Township is on the record as stating that his township is in a good place economically and has seen steady growth over the years. I don't think, Mayor Salonen, that you could say the same for this township. Unlike Loyalist, Wilmot has no prospective buyer for this mega factory, and this 51% tax boondoggle does not account for the costs associated with assembling this land and building this unprecedented mega factory. If the Government of Ontario has agreed to financially support Umicore's project in Loyalist Township through grants and tax credits, how does this township expect to garner additional tax revenue from a similar project here? The reality is that in order to attract international investment from multinational corporations, we would have to provide tax incentives, credits, tax breaks, and we would have to make up the shortfall somehow, presumably by another increase of perhaps 50% in taxes in years to come. That's similar to what, or very, very similar to what happened in Wisconsin with the Foxconn mega factory. It's been reported on extensively in the national and international media, but I'll remind you of some details. Foxconn, a massive private corporation with billions in revenue, committed to investing $10 billion US in a factory that would make LCD flat screen televisions. We all have one of those. Numerous economists expressed skepticism that the benefits to Wisconsin would exceed the cost of the deal for Wisconsin taxpayers. It was, after all, by far the largest tax incentive deal ever given to a foreign firm in U.S. history. Environmentalists criticized the deal for exempting the factory from Wisconsin's environmental rules, including being granted extensive water rights. Clearing the site involved the acquisition and demolition of houses through eminent domain. It's another term for expropriation. Any of this sounding familiar? In 2018, the Walker administration shifted up to $90 million in local road funding to road work related to the Foxconn factory, and the state of Wisconsin spent $252 million widening a portion of the I-94 from 6 to 8 lanes, anticipating an increase in traffic that would be generated from this wonderful project.
In January 2019, Foxconn said it was reconsidering its initial plans to manufacture LCD screens at the Wisconsin plant, citing high labor costs in the United States, and that it would hire mostly engineers and researchers rather than a manufacturing workforce. Whoops. Promises of 50,000 jobs quickly scaled down to 13,000, as reported by Bloomberg in early 2019. That figure quickly dwindled to only 1,500 workers in 2020. Roughly 4 square miles of land necessary for this boondoggle was, in part, made possible by forcing property owners to sell at a fixed price under the threat of seizing the land under eminent domain. Expropriation. Hundreds of residents were moved out of their homes and family farms. Let's move on to another example that's closer to home. The Region of Waterloo erroneously discounted an Amazon warehouse built in Cambridge by almost $14 million. Citizens, myself and others here, are out $14 million in their tax dollars after the Waterloo Regional Government says it miscalculated the development charge when a senior manager was away from the office. Shane Feddy, I think, was the regional financing manager. He told a provincial tribunal he was away from the office when the tax was miscalculated at $9 million. And he became aware of the error when a report came to him in September 22 after the Broccolinis had paid their taxes. Whoops. It's interesting to hear another lady here tonight with a miscalculated tax bill. 1 minute remaining. Let's skip ahead. I don't think we're going to fare any better with the OLT than the senior managers at the region. I don't think I think we'll get hoodwinked the same way they did. What's happening in my community now is not surprising. It is nonetheless heartbreaking, and it is a reminder of a phenomenon that is being experienced all across this country. Corporate concentration eroding the economic engines that we have built. I will leave with a quote from the Sherman Act of 1890. Expropriation is inconsistent, or actually I'm paraphrasing, expropriation is inconsistent with our form of government. If we will not endure a king as a political power, we should not endure a king over the production, transportation, and sale of any of the necessaries of life. If we would not submit to an emperor, we should not submit to an autocrat of trade. I would add that we should not submit to a township council that kowtows to the autocrats in the provincial government. Stop bowing to the region. Stop prostrating yourself to bullies. If you want people to accept your tax increase, you must declare Wilmot Township an unwilling host for this wealth transfer, excuse me, land assembly. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Gallery, just remind you not to, thank you. I do just want to make a note, I did allow you to continue as it was. I've let many people talk about future taxation impacts. I do want to be very clear though, this is currently what you're talking about is at the regional level. There is no current impact on the local Wilmot Township budget, and it is currently not a township decision. I just wanted to make that clear, but thank you very much for coming.
We're talking about trust though here, Mayor. We're talking about
I can appreciate that, Stephen. I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you very much for joining and for sharing your thoughts. I will now go on to our next speaker, and that is Don Slowinski. Don, thank you very much for joining us today, and you will have 7 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, and staff. I'm going to talk about the budget first. On page 5 we have the operating gap request of $1 million or 8% increase. We're talking for the addition of 5 more staff to our current staff of 85. In 2005, our staff was only 45. Is this a want or a must-have of 5 people? Is a $150,000 impact for each position too much? Don't hire any more staff. Accept the policy planner position, which was downloaded from the region, which we must have. Instead, hire consultants who are not a permanent drain on our resources. Going on pages 6 to 8, we're asking for a capital funding of $4.5 million or a 37% increase. We, the municipality, are cash poor. The township has a $3 million as of December 23 in reserve funds. We have a current debt of $13 million. We're not sure what constitutes the debt. I cannot find that listed anywhere, but I've been told that it is $13 million. The 2025 budget wants to add $4.7 million this year to the reserve fund. Is this $4.7 million going to be a one-time ask? Or is that a total dollar? And what is the total dollar goal for the reserve fund? Are there any other alternatives available to raise such funds? Can we issue municipal bonds to pay for infrastructure improvements? We are asset rich, $100 million in assets at least. The Wilmot Rec Center was bought and paid for with reserve funds when built. Can we sell the rec center for funds and then buy it back with a mortgage? Is that a possibility? Could we use those funds for creating a reserve fund balance? Okay, further on, where is the list of proposed capital expenditures for 2025? We need an itemized list so we know what we're being asked to spend the money on. Is the capital budget request an accurate summary? Is there anything we can cut or postpone? Capital budgeting plans for the purchase of or finance of assets or improvement of existing infrastructure, such as buildings, upgrading our municipal buildings, roads, and equipment, possibly could be funded by grants, including the Ontario Municipal Partnership Funding, the Canada Community Building Fund, and the annual Ontario Community Infrastructure Funds. I would hope that we would apply to all of these for as much funding as we could get. It was mentioned before, does the township have a current reserve fund study or a 10-year forecast? The last one I have been able to find is done in 2021. We need more up-to-date so we can plan properly. Is there a financial training program for onboarding new councillors? Is it possible to get training for the current councillors that may need it? Again, Councillor Cressman seems to be well qualified, but perhaps some are not. Going on, transparency and accountability. My understanding is included with the audited financial statements, which we only have up to 2022 at the moment, there were separately created management reports for council's information. This is not part of the audited financial statements, but it's a separate document. These would give insights into specific areas of municipal operations. Do these management reports exist, and are they available for our inspection? Again, audited financial statements are only available up to 2022. We're not current. Also, the financial information return is not current. It's only available for 2022. Now, I understand the situation with the CFO. He's only been on the job 8 months. He's been CAO for a double-headed job for 4 months. He's overwhelmed. And I can't expect somebody to turn the tap immediately, but I think those would have to be addressed quickly. Maybe not for this budget, but those are something that we need to plan, you as the council need to plan properly. I appreciate your time to listen, and I look forward to the progress. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for joining us this evening, Don. I will now call up our next speaker, and that is Steve Kidd. Thank you, Steve, for joining us, and you will have 7 minutes.
Madam Mayor, members of council and staff, ladies and gentlemen. In a famous speech given on June 16, 1858, Abraham Lincoln said the following, and I quote, A house divided against itself cannot stand. That still rings true today in a lot of things. The division of opinions within Wilmot Council regarding the township's budget process is a major concern for Wilmot taxpayers, given the current economic climate in this country. With ever-increasing costs faced by families, seniors, farmers, and businesses. On one hand, we have councillors who believe the budget as presented with a 51% increase to Township's portion of the property taxes as recommended by the CFO with little data to support such an increase is acceptable. On the other hand, we have fiscally responsible councillors who have requested more documentation from the CFO to justify proposed increases. From a financial perspective, there are many questions not addressed in the preparation of the CFO's budget as follows. Why is there no year-over-year analysis in the budget? A minimum of 3 years trending should be provided to Council for analysis and questions. Where is the cost versus benefit analysis, data on capital expenditures and requests? Why is there no measurable key performance indicators or basic metrics for Council to judge performance? Why has the CFO abandoned a previously agreed upon 10-year capital plan? Why is the lack of proper service costings and program costings not available? Where is the justification for hiring more staff? Councillors should reject the budget proposal that's pending until such time as they have documentation to justify additional spending and corresponding tax increases that would increase overall spending. Senior staff should be forthcoming with any and all information requested by Council to move the budget process along. Given the turnover in CAO and CFO positions in recent years, Council's request for information is indeed justified to inform taxpayers how our township is managed. Council's oath of office is to uphold what's in the best interest of taxpayers and hold staff to account in the performance of their duties to serve the taxpayer. Sometimes I think this gets lost. It's time for Wilmot Township to be run like a business, which requires decisions which are very difficult. But those decisions have to match the reality of our current economics. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Steve, for joining us this evening and sharing your thoughts. I will now call up our next speaker, and that is Stuart Snyder. We're just checking to see if Stuart is downstairs. It's been confirmed that he's on his way from downstairs, so just a few more moments. Hello, Stuart. Thank you for joining us this evening. You will have 7 minutes.
Sorry to hold everybody up, but lack of communication, I guess.
quite all right.
Anyways, Mayor Solonen, council members, staff, and fellow constituents. Wilmot Township has a big problem, one of the largest of any of the municipalities in Canada, just next to our federal government in Ottawa. 50% plus tax increases. You can see what it is doing to our economy wherever we are located. Council, this is your third budget. Was there no inkling in the previous two? 5% to 11%, now 51%. What a difference a year can make. Maybe if we just look back 1 year, we might see something that we can figure out what could be wrong. We have had staff turnover, maybe with different methods of doing books, or was it just a good snow job by staff? Shortly after elections, you knew reserves were in the deficit, which in good, normal business should never happen. This should have raised some bells and whistles. Obviously, we didn't hear them. Or is this the way the world is going? Seems to be everybody likes to spend everybody else's money. To go to the bank with this budget would be a laugh and a joke, a very serious joke. We, the constituents, are your bank. You're asking us not for a big loan, but for a massive grant. You should have it known now, loud and clear, no is the answer to this budget. Go back, rework it, cut it down, do whatever you have to do to it, come back and let's visit it again. I must give the current council credit. When you're elected, I saw a bright light at the end of the tunnel. I go back, I've been in Wilmot Township for 49 years. It's hard to believe that. I go back over the 49 years looking at previous councils. There always seemed to be a councillor and council that had to see something for him hiding back in the bush that he was after. This, I thought it was free and clear. I saw a good view of everybody. This one, as said, it appears to be free and clear. But maybe there again, I was just snowed. With the tax, whatever the tax increase is, rest assured, it will only be the plateau for the next tax issues. We will not go backwards. What could be bigger problems, when asked in the past, and I'm sorry you mentioned it earlier, Mayor, and I'm going to bring it up again, what part of this budget is pertaining to the potential land assembly out there? I was always told nothing involved with it. It's a regional and a provincial matter. This is very hard to believe. 4 new fire trucks and a new fire station to look after the current growth of Wilmot Township. Give your head a shake. Who will be responsible for all the new roads, services, infrastructures, everything that can come by because of this? Simple thing is, how many times do we really need security at a township meeting? Should we need it? No. All it'll boil down to, we've got to realize what's going to happen when we come with a corporate freeloader looking for more handouts, to tax benefits, incentives to come to Wilmot Township. We have to realize we have to get anywhere, we have to get our own house in order first before we try extending outside of the countryside line. It will be years before we possibly see any major revenue from that mega site. We'll be long aligned with Kitchener or the region by that time. We must declare that we are an unwilling host. We have pockets of bare land in Wilmot Township that nothing's being done with. Let's change it from Wilmot Township to Wilmot. Let's get out there and entice those guys to get doing something with those pockets of land. I'm sure revenue on developed land is much far better than sitting empty. When I moved to Wilmot Township 49 years ago, I did not look at the economics of Wilmot Township. It wasn't even on the radar. I never even thought about it. It wasn't there. Obviously, some other people since then have thought the same thing. You look at Morningside, Foxborough, and Stonecroft. Were they snowed to come to Wilmot Township too? Now they're here, now they've got to pay. What do we have to do to take Wilmot Township back to Wilmot is what we have to work hard, work at it hard, and together. Part of this problem is yours as a council, part of the problem is yours as a staff, and part of the problem, I will admit, is ours as constituents. We have failed to ask questions. If we do ask questions, we would like some answers. We don't always get them. So how can we move ahead that way? I guess in the last comment, these town halls, I think they were excellent things because we had the opportunity to ask questions. The problem is, I don't like the idea that we have to ask these questions when we're in dire straits. We just have to try and solve these problems beforehand. Let's have a town hall meeting when we've got something good to talk about. Lastly, to councillors, I probably shouldn't say it this way, but I will. I was told not to say it, but get ready, and I'm not pointing a finger at anybody. There seems to be a disconnect in the council. To get anywhere in Wilmot Township, we have to work together for the future. With that disconnect going on, we're not going to get anywhere. We're just going to paddle.
Thank you very much, Stuart, for joining us. I'll just remind the gallery again, please. Thank you. Thank you very much, Stuart. I will now call on our next delegate, and that is Andre Barkratz. I apologize if I mispronounced.
Very close.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. You'll have
Mayor
7 minutes.
Sullivan, dear councillors, I came with my wife, Kasia, here to express our great opposition against any kind of tax increases, not 51% tax increases. We joined this community 10 years ago, and in the first year, in 2015, we paid $6,400 in our taxes. Last year, 24, we paid $8,128, which is 27% increase. In average, 3% per year. I think it is manageable. And if it stays this way, we could live with it. We are on a fixed income, as many other people in this community. And for us, it is really unbearable to get 51% increase. It's really difficult to manage. I'm coming from automotive industry, running various businesses in this industry. In the automotive industry, there is a common thing that our customers require cost reductions every year, about 3%. No matter what, you had to do it on top of wage increases, general price increases for materials, and that our customer, that means our owners, wanted to have a profit as well. How did we do it? Every year we employed continuous improvement program. Groups of people looking on every aspect of our business. Where is a potential cost reduction? Every dollar would count. And I think this is necessary to do here as well. In this community, we have plenty of people retired with a great knowledge. And they would probably come here free of charge and assist you to find a way to reduce your expenses and look for areas which certain capital expenses or operational expenses could be postponed to the later date and not burden us with this kind of increase. We voted for you. We hoped that you're going to represent us to our benefit, not to our bad situation, to give us this bad situation. I hope you can take this advice and maybe reach to other people in the area and in our Wilmot Township and get help. Because only 6 of you, plus whatever staff you have, may not be enough to do this kind of analysis and create a 10-year business plan. Without that, nobody can run business, and Township is the business. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andre, for joining us and for sharing your thoughts. I will just remind the gallery, thank you. Councillor Dunstall looks to have a question.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. I wanted to thank you. I have had several seniors come up to me and explain to me what their experience has been in the business world, whether it's Six Sigma, HR, production, and there's a lot of knowledge out there, and you're right, we do have a higher average of retirees or 55 plus, and I think that's a great resource that we haven't tapped into, and I thank you, and I know a few of you I've spoken to will be contacting me, and I would certainly like to speak with you too, sir. Thank you so much for your time.
Take advantage of us.
Absolutely, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll now call up our next delegate, and that is Mark Ratcliffe. Thank you very much, Mark, for joining us this evening, and you will have 7 minutes.
So to the councillors and to yourself, thank you for hosting this meeting. Before I start, I would like to confirm what Andre just pointed out. I did actually offer 8 months ago to come and help the financial services with Six Sigma, and I had 0 calls calling me back. And actually part of this clearly indicates why I was offering it. But starting off, at the January 5th Town Hall meeting at the New Hamburg Community Centre, one of the attendees brought up the point about the purchase of a 35-acre lot in New Hamburg. The response from the Director of Finance was to assure everyone that no such purchase had, and I quote, passed across his desk. And he was only aware of the procurement of a small piece of land. After approximately 10 minutes, somebody phoned up. An external viewer phoned up and pointed out that indeed Wilmot Township had purchased that land. I don't mind admitting at that point all types of warning bells went through my head. So my first question is, when was that land purchased? And why wasn't the Director of Finance made aware of it? Why was that asset purchased? And, why was that asset purchased during a time of fiscal concerns, and for what reason? I don't know the cost of that land, but I kind of estimate it's going to be a minimum of $750,000, depending on where it is near the road and obviously what it's zoned for. But it's still a substantial sum of money. Because of that purchase, I believe it might have slanted the budget because it was not made aware by the Director of Finance that he was aware of it, and that concerns me a lot. Personally, if I was in the council, I would not vote for this budget. Clearly there are some omissions, maybe inaccuracies in this budget that needs to be gone over by independent auditors to make sure that it's a fair and honest budget. Back to why one of my concerns about making the offer. So historically, 2024, my wife and I had significant problems and costly errors caused by the township's totally erroneous and outdated policies and procedures. I'll clarify. For months, we were paying 2 property taxes for where we lived. Then we moved and continued to pay those 2 property taxes, and then we found out that our move, again within the township, had incurred another tax. Unfortunately for us, that tax bill was sent to North York, not Baden. This is just one indication of some of the substantial changes that needs to happen. I have not heard of any evidence to address these inefficiencies from the council. And I've actually been there a couple of times and I see no metrics in place for people to look at and to feel more confident going forward. So I'll reiterate on that one point. I now believe that the submitted budget has inaccuracies and should not be voted on and audited to investigate the accuracy of those figures. It's both unfair and unwise to expect the voting council to pass or reject that submitted budget. And I'm sorry if I sound like a broken record, but my God, everyone's singing the same song here, guys. You must be becoming aware of it. As stated, part of the proposed increases are for new hires. In the real world, and I do unfortunately come from the real world, given the supposedly poor fiscal situation, responsible organisations would automatically put all hiring on a freeze and also freeze salaries. So why isn't the executives doing that? And then finally, as stated at the town hall meeting on Sunday, there was a large number of retirees in the community. If one looks at what was declared recently by the CPP and the government, they're going to award a 2.6% increase. That's assuming you're on $1,000 CPP, that represents a $26 increase per month. And you are proposing not only is that $26 given to you, but you also have to shell out an additional $15.70. So I'm asking you why? And then finally, please stop making the local taxpayers your victims. You need to get your act together. You really do.
Thank you very much, Mark. I do just want to make one clarity on the land purchase component. That was a decision of this council prior to our current CFO being brought on board. I just wanted timeline-wise to clarify that for everyone. But thank you very much for coming and for sharing your thoughts. I will now call up our next delegate, Adam Van Burkite. Adam, thank you very much for joining us this evening, and you will have 7 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor and Council and staff and constituents. There's a lot of grass cut already in front of me, or at this time of the year, snow is snowed away. I know that we cannot change history, but we can learn from the past. If we do not ask the right questions and get the right answers, what was the reason why we are where we are? We have been investing in prestigious things, but was that affordable? What has happened with our roads? Now the highway is overflowing and amounts of commute traffic is overflowing, overcrowding our rural roads. And it's not the time to ask, is it not the time to ask the governing body who is responsible for the highway to care of this capacity issue? Recently, by Punky Doodle Corner, Huron Road was the road to go, and it was a nightmare to need to your work there in that direction. And the road has been really suffered, really bad. It's a really bad condition. And we can patch whatever we need, but it's a bad road now. But the cost of overstressed roads, is that our township's problem? The province is taking planning away from the region and it refers it to the township. Are we capable to take that on? Did we hire already planners, or is it still in the process? What is the effect on the budget? And the region is still raising the tax with 9.48%. So no savings there as it looked like. What kind of direction will be given to planning department? Is there any indication in which direction we're going? Is a bigger development and commercial or industrial the direction we want to go? And if we are going to expand, as it looked like, thinking about the land what is north of the highway, and also what will be the mega industrial site of 770 acres. Sorry, I couldn't leave that by itself. Have for an impact on our budget. Just for infrastructure, entertainment, extra pressure on service and safety and health, and for sure our water. As a manager of a business, we need to make choices we can afford. And sometimes the banker will say that is viable, or it's not. And if it's not, you need to change your plans. And if you do it anyway, because you don't listen to the banker, you create troubles in your relationship. Now we learned that the township bought a 35-acre, knowingly their financial situation. And we learn now it's a done deal. Your bank and the citizen from Wilmot Township, do we have the right to say no? And on top of that, if we see the increases in our values, not only if it's from 2016 to now, it's quite an increase. And beside that, we got a commercial tax on our cheese plant, and it has been for years. I've tried to fight it. Nobody from the township can help. Nobody from the province can help. MPAC doesn't listen. What are we doing? Is that fair? It took us 3 years to get our permits for our cheese plant, with all kind of issues raised by staff to hold up our plans. And if I see that happening, is that also going to take that long for mega sites? We don't want to be a willing host. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adam, for joining us this evening. I will remind the gallery, thank you. Thank you, Adam. And I will now move on to our next delegate, George Lavallee. Thank you very much, George, for joining us this evening, and you will have 7 minutes.
I take it I'm not the last one?
There's one more after you.
Oh, so I don't get the wind-up speech. Okay, good. Madam Chair, Council, appreciate you spending the time and listening, and the staff, and more importantly, all you people for showing up. I think that was more important to these people to see you. I think the issue you've got here, it's not a case of the 51%. It's a case of the reality of what's going on. What I want to explain to you is I got a degree from the University of Pennsylvania, the Wharton School in Business. That's an Ivy League school. So you know I've got a little bit of education there. I've been in real estate 50 years. I was president of the Kitchener Board. I was on the provincial RECO board for 6 years, and I was chair for a year. I've gone from Alaska to Florida to California to whatever, learning about this stuff. I'm getting old. I don't need to tell you what to do. I don't want to sit and volunteer my time. I already keep working and working because I want to enjoy life. And if you want to enjoy life, keep working. Having been in real estate, if you take this tax increase and you apply it to a mortgage, as you know, principal, interest, and taxes is how you qualify. 30% of your income. So if you take on the average, you're going to look at about $10,000 extra income to qualify for a mortgage. So that means people want to buy here, or they want to buy Kitchener, or they want to buy wherever. They need $10,000 more here to buy the same house they could have bought last year. What you have to look at is interest rates are coming down. The economy is going to get better. This is not the year to be going crazy over it. You take also the example in Petersburg where those people paying $50,000 for water this year. And on top of that, I don't want to be cruel here, but somebody figured out we should do a study on drainage, and another $3 million spent. And we have a town hall meeting, and the guy says, oh yeah, by the way, you pay, there's no question about it. What, are you kidding me? What am I paying all these taxes? No, you got to pay. So on top of 50% tax here, $50,000 for the water, another $200 to $10,000. They want $8,000 for my property in Petersburg for drainage. I don't have a drainage problem. I got to pay for the guy down the road. But that's being in the community. What we have to understand is you can't pay everybody for everything. One of the concerns I have listening to people talk is, oh, you know, the groceries are up, taxes are up, but you guys can't have any more money. Well, you're working too, and I'm not suggesting you shouldn't have more money. What I'm suggesting to you is you shouldn't be empire building, hiring 5 more people. I've sat on many, many, many finance committees over the years, and they say, we want to do this, we want to do that. Can we afford it? No. Then we don't do it. If you have the nerve and you have the gumption to come up to us and say we want a 50%, 51 or whatever percent increase, then certainly you have the nerve to go back to your people and say, we're not giving you this, and you're not getting that, and you're not getting this, and we're going to a 10% increase. That would be a lot braver, more of a hero than anything, than insulting us with a 51% proposal. Because you come back at 30 and see, oh, we cut it right down. No, you didn't. You embarrassed us. The thing that really bothers me about a council like this and listening to the staff, and I've heard this and I told you, I've been all over, wow, this is how they do it. My answer to that is they jumped off the bridge. Are we going with them? I don't care what they did. I don't care how they're going to do it. I'll listen to it, but that doesn't mean that's right for me. What you have to do is understand, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So how are you going to make this budget work? One bite at a time. Take out what you can't have. Want, deserve, need. I don't know, there's only one in there that really counts, and that's the need. Want, it's gone. And deserve, it's hard to say. I mean, it's a lot of people think, well, I deserve. No, you don't. Do we really need to add $8,000 or $10,000 or $15,000 to a new building and put all your names on it? You didn't pay for it. Every arena, every building I went to, all these great big plaques for all the mayors, and hey, they approved it. I understand it, but not on their dollar. You want that plaque? Pay for it. The other question I have here is, I keep going back to this, and I know some people didn't mention it. The 770 acres would be an awful lot of tax money. And so are we saying, well, you know what? You made us look bad. You said you shouldn't be buying that, so we're going to tax it and get it back. Well, no, farmland gets about a third of the tax rate of residential. And I agree with that. There's only so much money coming out of that farm. And as the one gentleman said, his family's been here for years and years and years. But if I owned a 100-acre farm and you offered me $100,000 an acre, I'd be gone so fast I'd be buying another farm, or I'd be in Florida with my feet up. Now maybe it's just me. But if you like the land that much, buy another farm somewhere else for $50,000 an acre. It can be done. I'm in real estate. I'll take it by hand and do it. And you don't have to go hundreds of miles from here either. The thing that concerns me too is everybody says, well, you got to ask the province for more money and the federal money for more money. Why don't we just triple our income taxes so we can all have less property taxes? Who do you think is paying all this money? We're not a bank. We have to have some security and knowledge of saying, if we do something, are we going to be still there? A couple of things I have to ask is, when the vote is taken, it should be recorded who voted for it and who didn't. For the next election, I think it's kind of a big starting step. And it's also important to know that you're elected. You're the people we elected, not them. So whatever they say is very, very good knowledge. It's up to you. Don't come back and say, they said. I don't care what they say. I'll listen to it. They're not responsible. Having sat on many, many, many boards, many, many, many finance committees, I've had it all come to back with, oh, we have to do this, we have to. Why? Well, because we like it. Can you afford it? No. And then you get a good year and you say, you know what? We can afford it. Let's do it. This 5 extra staff, it's just empire building. It's just, you don't empire build when the economy's gone for a pit. 3 years from now, the rates are down and everybody's building and everybody's buying and new cars. Go ahead, get your empire going. In the meantime, you're going to know everybody in your staff by first name because you're going to be working with them. Not out at the golf course talking to people or having an extra cup of coffee because you won't have time.
If I can just have your concluding moments, I apologize. I forgot to notify you at the 1 minute mark, so if you can just wrap it up in about 2 seconds.
So in conclusion, I just want to say you're the leaders and we expect you to take care. Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, George. And I must say that's the first time I've heard the turn of phrase of eating an elephant, but I might be using it in the future. But thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us tonight. And our last delegate of the evening is Kevin Thomason. Kevin, thank you very much for joining us this evening, and you will have 7 minutes.
Excellent. Honorable Mayor, councillors and guests. My name is Kevin Thomason, a longtime Wilmot resident and a member of the Fight for Farmland group, trying to save our communities from the disaster of the Wilmot Land Assembly and unplanned growth being forced onto our unwilling community. This proposed budget, with a 51% tax increase, is also a disaster, as you have heard from so many citizens. There are few citizens supporting a massive tax increase, just like there are also hardly any citizens supportive of this proposed mega industrial site that will negatively impact our community in so many ways. At least, though, there is some transparency with this budget proposal. There have been many public meetings in a very short time, and no one is refusing to answer the community's questions, citing an NDA. I want to talk about incongruencies, and when hastily made decisions without proper and adequate information override carefully considered, well-planned, long-term plans. The future being proposed by this council looks staggeringly different than the Wilmot official plan and the regional official plan that have been the guiding documents for our communities for decades, with updates approved most recently in 2019 and 2022 respectively, just prior to this new term of council. These 30-year-long visionary planning documents chart out where we're going to grow, how we're going to build, what are we going to protect, what are we going to destroy, and have been the foundation for the extraordinary success of our township and region has achieved. Quite simply, we have done planning better than most others and achieved a quality of life and community that is the envy of much of the world. The regional official plans have consistently allocated 40% growth to Wilmot, meaning that over the next 30 years, our population will grow by about 10,000 people to 35,000 people here in Wilmot. The regional official plan had a focus on sustainable growth and farmland preservation, yet allocated more farmland destruction to Wilmot than any other municipality. About 86 acres of farmland lost to Greenfield subdivision over the next 30 years to accommodate this new population, which is also about the remaining capacity of not only our sewage treatment plant, but also the entire Ninth River as it exceeds its assimilative capacity and we grow beyond what our watershed can support. However, not satisfied with this 40% growth, which already places us amongst the fastest growing municipalities in North America, this council first in December 2022 and then again in March 2023 requested not just 86 acres for future population growth, but hundreds of acres more from the provincial government, bypassing regional government completely and the decades of carefully planning and coordinated resources and growth across our region. Instead, without any studies, without any documentation other than a small Wilmot staff report, this council requested hundreds and hundreds of acres of urban boundary expansion, knowing full well that the minister granting this forced boundary expansion wanted these lands developed by 2031. With no proper justification, the minister approved hundreds of acres of industrial expansion outside our countryside line that was supposed to last for generations, despite the fact that not a single lot has been sold in the existing empty Wilmot industrial lands in the past 23 years that sit vacant and costing considerable money despite previous investment by the township. The minister also approved, at this council's request, hundreds of acres of additional residential urban boundary expansion, every acre between Baden and New Hamburg, enough for tens of thousands of people, even at modest densities, far lower than what most builders are constructing subdivisions these days at. There have been no studies. We have no idea where the water will come from and where the sewage will go. The public has been in the dark on this massive proposed growth, and there's been no financial costing that I am aware of for so much required infrastructure. Nor does there seem to be much consideration of all this massive growth that the province approved, anticipating construction completion in just 6 years.
Can you just make sure that you're relating this to the budget that's before us today?
That's correct. And let me repeat this sentence. No anticipating construction completion in just 6 years in any of this proposed budget that is already facing a massive 51% tax increase. We know that development doesn't pay for itself with a 30% shortfall that has to be made up by local taxpayers. Municipalities across Ontario are struggling to fund any new infrastructure as Doug Ford has cut development charges for developers, dramatically reducing what municipalities can charge and not following through on promises to make municipalities whole. This council is similarly supporting the massive proposed 770-acre mega industrial site and refusing to declare that Wilmot is an unwilling host despite massive public outrage and the complete lack of any financial studies, projections, or information. There is no evidence that the Land Assembly will provide any financial benefit to Wilmot Township, and will most likely only further deepen our township's financial woes, given the complete lack of infrastructure and proper planning, including official plans or master plans, for such a massive development in an area where no development of any sort was ever anticipated. As other communities such as Loyalist Township in Eastern Ontario has found, to the dismay of their taxpayers, who now find themselves on the hook for $30 million and the province refusing to pay, too often these large-scale industrial developments aren't the cash cow they've been led to believe, and instead end up costing them dearly, as in their case, Umicore backs out of the EV battery facility that was supposed to bring over $2 billion to their community.
1 minute remaining.
Thank you.
Please.
Too many decisions have been made here too hastily, with too little information, and incongruent to all previous planning. This council has ignored citizens raising concerns here repeatedly, as I spoke against these forced boundary expansions and the overriding of the regional official plan in December 2022 and delegated alongside others in March.
Point of order, is this about planning or is this about the budget, Kevin?
They're all heavily related. So the raising financial concerns.
I would just ask that you do directly relate your final concluding comments to the budget itself.
How many citizens have spoken up over the past year with concerns about this mega industrial site that still hasn't had a single public meeting, study released, and no financial costing of any sort that we're aware of?
Directly of what is in front of council is the proposed budget. If you would like to make concluding comments on the proposed budget before us, I think you've made your point about planning, but it's veered quite far off. So you can make a concluding 2 sentences about the budget proposal before council.
The cost of this is increasingly clear. We're not a willing host, and a clear message needs to be sent by this council to the region or province.
Kevin,
we already had the plans needed for a successful future.
I'm going to have to cut you off. It was not directly related to the budget, that final part, but thank you for sharing your
All of these
comments.
are costs that have to be incurred by our township and citizens.
Okay. Thank you very much, Kevin, for joining us this evening and for sharing your thoughts.
That's it. Any questions?
It does not look like we have questions, no. Thank you very much, Kevin. That concludes the portion of our delegates for this evening. And I just want to say, again, a huge thank you to everyone who came and delegated, as well as everyone who has reached out to council, attended council's town halls, as well as I know in announcements, you're going to be reminded of another one coming up again. And thank you for all of the correspondence as well. Councillors, did anybody want to pull a particular correspondence item? Okay, seeing none. Jumping into announcements, just want to remind everybody that the second Prime Minister's Path Community Tea Circle is happening on January 13th from 6 until 8 p.m. at the New Hamburg Community Centre, and you can RSVP by emailing pmp@wilmot.ca. And Councillor Cressman, did you want to just make note?
Yes. Ward 1, we're holding a town hall in New Dundee this Thursday at 7 till 9, and so that's January the 9th, 7 to 9, and we will be talking about the budget, and that will be the focus, and we're looking for solutions. And I heard some good ones. I didn't want to suggest some of the ones I heard this evening weren't appropriate. I've lived those, so I'm interested in solutions that you bring forward.
Thank you. Any other announcements, councillors? Councillor Dunstall?
Actually, it's not an announcement, Mayor, and I hope it's okay for me to say this, but I've been working on a motion with Clerk Boz in support of the Town of Aurora's motion to have the portions of the land transfer tax and GST transferred over to municipalities to help them with infrastructure. And that's already been supported by 11 other municipalities, including Stratford and Puslinch. So that's something that we will add our name as Wilmot Council to support that, to try to get some more of those funds back into our pockets.
Okay. Thank you for letting us know of the soon-to-be upcoming motion, Councillor. With that, I don't see any other announcements other than, as this is a budget meeting, just reminding you all that Council is going to be deliberating the budget itself on the 16th, which I believe is next Thursday. That will be both in the Council chambers as well as virtually recorded as well. So we hope that you'll be able to join for that. And please do continue to reach out to your councillors, as well as you can reach out to budget@wilmot.ca if you have additional questions as well that you'd like to go directly to staff. And again, just thank you very much for coming out tonight. And confirmatory bylaw, may I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Dunstall, seconded by Councillor Martin. All those in favour? That carries unanimously. And adjournment, may I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Martin. All those in favour? That carries unanimously. Have a good night, everyone.